The shadow of 536 AD. In the year 536 AD, darkness fell upon the world. Picture a sun that emitted a weak glow, casting shadows as faint as whispers. A year chilling enough for summer snow to blanket dry fields, the air holding an unseasonal, biting cold. Throughout the lands, farmers watched helplessly as their crops withered, and hunger became an unwelcome presence at every meal. Desperate hands clutched at bark and weeds, seeking anything to fill the emptiness. Empires wavered, ambitions of conquest turned to dust. As whispers of a creeping plague circulated around hushed firesides, a question echoed through the ages. Could this truly be the end of the world, facing the battlefield dawn? Imagine the dawn breaking over a battlefield, the sky ablaze with the fiery colors of sunrise. Anticipation hangs heavy in the air. Knights and soldiers are mere dark shapes, ready for the day's grim performance. The clash of metal resounds in the crisp morning as armor, piece by piece, encases each man in a cold embrace, a shield of hope, a pledge of returning to home and hearth. The stakes are colossal, a life or death gamble with destiny, guided by unseen forces. Amidst murmured prayers and stirring calls, you stand, lost in your own thoughts. Beyond the ironclad defense of your armor, fear and a strange calm coexist, each heart beating its unique, somber rhythm. It's as if you are bound not only to the land you're about to protect, but also to the spectral warriors of the past, whose blood has soaked the soil beneath you. Seeds of doubt in the onset of battle. Yet a shadow lingers in a corner of your mind, sowing seeds of doubt. The day might not end favorably for your side. The air carries the stench of sweat and tense anticipation, the kind that leaves a bitter taste. Beneath the clamor, a silent dread unfurls its tendrils, whispering the stark truth that survival might require more than just bravery. With little formality, battle commences, a chaotic symphony of colliding steel and guttural shouts. Dust swirls like a whirlwind, merging with the metallic scent of blood and disturbed earth, leaving a sharp residue that clings to the senses. To onlookers, it's a breathtaking spectacle, perhaps a brutal display of courage. But within this turmoil, survival is the only imperative. The world is perceived through the haze of immediate peril, the arc of an enemy's blade, the cry of a fallen comrade, the battlefield seemingly shrinking with every heartbeat. Grand ideas of glory dissipate, leaving only the raw impulse to endure. Then it occurs, the turning tide and impending defeat, the inconceivable. The firm front line devolves into a trembling mass. Once an unyielding barrier, it now gives way, fear snaking through the ranks. Confident commands dissolve into panicked shouts. Unity breaks down into desperate self-preservation. You sense it then, the undeniable shift in momentum, the creeping realization that defeat is drawing nearer. The trumpets, those symbols of courage, fall silent. The air is now thick with despair. Witnessing your leader fall to an enemy's blow, your resolve, your guiding light, underscores the unfolding tragedy. The enemy advances, eyes gleaming not with mere ambition, but with a primal thirst for blood. There's no longer space for heroic acts, only the cold calculation of escaping death's grip. Survival over glory. Tales of knights and chivalrous acts recede into the realm of myth. The noble ideals of honor are gone. Before you stands the stark reality of imminent defeat. The battlefield feels like a trap tightening around you. It's a scene where the desperate urge to survive overshadows any notion of bravery. Fighting words vanish, replaced by a more instinctive desire to turn and flee, ensuring you live to see another day. What is universally shared in these quiet moments is that terrifying acceptance, the point where hope yields to a cold, clear understanding. Perhaps it was witnessing a friend's final moments or a sudden awareness of the enemy closing in too fast. For some, it arrives like a lightning strike. For others, it's a slow, insidious approach. But when it arrives, it lands with a heavy impact, a chill that penetrates to the very core. The fervent belief in victory is gone. What remains is an unvarnished truth. Accepting defeat carries its own unique weight, a shift from grand aspirations to the simple, unpretentious task of staying alive. The legacy of retreat. Past boasts of glory sound hollow, replaced by the grim silence of survival. Those who remain to face defeat carry on with the quiet understanding that the world's story isn't solely shaped by triumph. Instead, it is equally molded by those who navigate its currents and survive another day. Amid the settling dust, the cries of the lost linger like specters, a lament for unfulfilled dreams. Each retreat is a page unturned, reminders of a harsh reality where survival takes precedence over duty. It may seem perplexing to modern sensibilities, but in ancient times, living to see another dawn was the greatest achievement. They left behind stories not of cowardice, but of the enduring human will to outlast disaster. In fleeing, there was no dishonor. In truth, it was the most genuine form of valor, trusting one's instincts over the romantic allure of conquest. It's in these moments, amidst chaos and despair, that the surging heartbeat is the sole measure of existence. Desperation as a force is not cowardly. It is resilient. It reminds you that the rhythm of life defies the rigid boundaries of bravery and disgrace. Frankly, retreat was not failure. It was life's persistent song against the dance of death, a choice that allowed history to be more than just a list of victories. Standing at the edge of the present, looking back at the hazy echoes of retreating warriors, it becomes clear that such tales intertwine not just with myth, but with the very essence of humanity. Perhaps it is these narratives of surrender and instinctive survival that lend true depth to history, echoing the unwavering truth of life's mysterious persistence. The cry of defeat and spreading panic. The battlefield's rhythm, once vibrant with life and fierce determination, could be shattered by a single cry. Imagine that moment, a lone voice, raw and desperate, cutting through the noisy din, announcing the dreaded defeat. This solitary shout, perhaps tinged with fear or stark certainty, set the stage for the chaos that followed. Not unlike the sudden flutter in a flock of birds, this cry sent medieval soldiers, regardless of rank or courage, into a spiral of panic. Communication was scarce, and leaders blended seamlessly into the crowd, leaving the warriors vulnerable to the storm of terror that ensued. Panic, much like an unleashed storm, swept through the ranks, dissolving the very fabric of disciplined warfare. Knights in shining armor abandoned their firm positions, consumed by primal urges. Horsemen, once the symbol of order, now found themselves at the mercy of their rearing steeds. Chaos on the battlefield. The battlefield descended into a cacophony, a chaotic struggle of soldiers discarding swords and shields, each heartbeat rising above the clang of discarded metal. In this frenzy, horses, once loyal companions, became instruments of chaos. Trained to obey their riders, they too succumbed to panic, rearing and fleeing without direction. The precise formations of the cavalry dissolved, replaced by frenzied masses stampeding through their own lines, wreaking havoc in their wake. The collapse was not merely a failure of discipline. It revealed the vulnerabilities of both man and beast amidst the horrors of war. The psychological impact on soldiers was profound, their trusted horses suddenly unpredictable, adding layers of despair to the unfolding pandemonium. Amidst the symphony of clashing metal, whinnies and cries, a dark drama unfolded, a scene where strategy failed and the instinct for survival reigned supreme. Leadership vanished as quickly as panic emerged. Those who once inspired courage in their men became powerless. The pragmatism of retreat. Their commands were lost in the collective retreat. Officers, aware that the tide was too strong to stem, sometimes chose to flee alongside their troops, realizing that not every battle was meant to be won. Fear thrived in the void left by abandoned commands, stifling any attempts to regroup or restore order. It wasn't always cowardice, it was practical. The battle was lost, and their duty lay elsewhere. Weapons were dropped as men weighed survival against the debris of battle. Heavy swords and cumbersome shields, symbols of their power, became burdens cast aside in the desperate scramble for life. Each abandoned weapon was a testament to the shift from combat to escape. The battlefield, once a domain of valor and might, echoed with the mournful clang of discarded weapons, a tragic testament to fear's dominance. Warriors who had wielded their swords with purpose now saw them as hindrances to a slim chance at life. The clangs and cries signaled a change in narrative, where the value of life outweighed the spectacle of war. The illusion of unity. Panic spread through the ranks like wildfire, leaving the army's cohesion in ruins. The close-knit bonds intended for strategic execution became a trap, dooming units as fear took hold. Once disciplined lines dissolved, abandoning themselves to the chaotic energy of terror. Soldiers engulfed by dread fueled the panic. Each man's fear fed the next. The superstitions and whispered horrors of enemy cruelty only intensified the situation, reinforcing the idea that flight was the only guarantee of survival. The perceived safety of numbers became an illusion, a restriction rather than a comfort. Soldiers pressed together struggled for escape in the chaos. The image of unity shattered as panic transformed battle lines into a maelstrom of nascent humanity, each warrior striving to break free from the human tide. Those ranks designed to instill fear in the enemy hindered each man's frantic search for freedom. Unity buckled under the weight of personal survival as camaraderie gave way to individual flight in a jostling sea of desperation, a grim tableau of defeat. Once terror took root, the battlefield recounted a grim story of collapse. What was orchestrated chaos became a realm of discord, scarred by relics of abandoned bravery. Banners lay crumpled, armor gleamed amidst the dust, and weapons littered the earth. This scene of defeat depicted not just a lost cause, but fear's unbridled control over human will. The landscape, once a testament to strategic power, became a silent witness to humans at their most vulnerable, driven not by honor, but by the relentless need to survive. Amidst the chaos, a new haunting melody emerged, the sound of retreat. The usual battle symphony gave way to a jarring crescendo of metal, cries, and pounding hearts. Commands faded into whispers, swallowed by distance as soldiers made their escape. Faces of fear and resolve. Pain and desperation merged in a discordant opera, capturing the battlefield's transition into pure survival mode. Faces, masks of fear and determination, painted a poignant gallery of human fragility. Warriors, once majestic in their defiance, wore looks of stark terror or steely resolve, eyes searching the chaos for relief. In their expressions lay unspoken tales of the conflict at the heart's core, duty clashing against the instinct to flee. Within the tapestry of panic, each face told a story, a glimpse into the soul's battle between courage and survival. Immortalized amidst the cruel dance of warfare, this haunting scene etched into history captures a moment that transcends time, where the omnipresence of fear speaks eternally of our shared past amidst the specter of loss. The burden of armor. Imagine the weight of medieval armor, not just as a physical burden, but as a profound constraint. Each piece, a carefully crafted steel helmet or a chainmail shirt, offered vital protection from arrows and swords. Yet when a battle went wrong, these layers of metal became suffocating, dragging knights down. The armor, weighing up to 55 pounds, had to be cast aside in the frenzy of retreat. Where protection had once reigned supreme, mobility now held sway. The jarring clatter of armor hitting the ground marked a moment of desperate transformation, a gamble to merge into the crowd and vanish from sight. In the heat of chaos, knights abandoned their bronze and iron shells. The act was as much an emotional release as a strategic move, shedding the ostentatious symbols of nobility that once proclaimed their lineage and stature. Shedding identity for survival. To flee was to shed societal identity, becoming part of the anonymous tide of humanity. It was a metamorphosis of necessity where knights merged into the indistinct forms of commoners. With helmets and breastplates discarded, their silhouettes lost the distinguishing features of authority, turning into unremarkable outlines amidst fleeing peasants. The stakes were incredibly high. A noble's capture meant either ransom or death. A rapid shift to anonymity was the best defense. This shedding of layers was a jarring break from lives dedicated to the performance of chivalry and status. As banners and shields also fell, emblems of noble heritage and allegiance, the urgency to survive reduced these symbols to token gestures. A shield could no longer offer protection. Instead, it drew enemy eyes. Discarding these items was not only strategic, it reflected a deeper shift where legacy had to yield to the primal urge to survive. The once prized coat of arms became a glaring target at a time when preserving one's life mattered more than ancestral pride. The peril of banners. War banners, powerful symbols on the battlefield, now became liabilities. They served as guides and morale boosters for troops, but attracted danger when battle lines collapsed. Their bright colors, which radiated courage, became flashing targets as the situation deteriorated. In abandoning them, warriors chose survival over tradition, each banner lowering like a silent promise to be unfurled another day. This was self-preservation pitted against deeply ingrained identities, a calculation many faced in the breathless escape from enemy clutches. Adopting peasant clothing was a critical tactic laden with irony. Noblemen accustomed to vibrant tunics now donned drab attire meant for anonymity, leaving behind the comfortable guise of wealth to become part of the civilian blur. A strategy of disguise. Think of it as a strategy based on disguise. What defined importance on one day became a threat the next. Shedding the trappings of nobility required embracing humility, prioritizing survival over pride in a desperate role reversal. Unremarkable peasant clothing offered a shield of anonymity, a ticket away from captors interested more in recognizable targets. The irony was profound. Those so accustomed to the trinity of status, power, and wealth now placed their faith in invisibility. The transformation leveled medieval hierarchies and exposed the fragility of social illusion maintained by circumstances, not merely cloth or armor. In the frenzy, noble lines blurred significantly with those they once ruled over, creating a temporary respite from societal norms that perpetuated the stark divides. The transformative power of anonymity. The experience of anonymity transformed lives. Noblemen discarding prestigious clothing stepped into the shoes of ordinary souls. The weight of steel became a lesser burden compared to societal concealment. As the realities of survival became shared among all ranks in the aftermath of retreat, knights re-emerged with newfound perspectives. They glimpsed life in humanity's guise, a stark contrast to their fortified backgrounds. This sense of anonymity unintentionally narrowed the gap between luxury and commonality. However, shedding armor was not without peril. The physical abandonment of plated shells, quickly discarded for speed, carried significant risks. Unarmed and exposed, knights faced the raw elements, the vast, unpredictable wheel of fate, showing them the fragility of flesh that was once secure. The experience wasn't merely physical, it reshaped self-perception, peeling back layers that separation through nobility had once carefully cultivated. Encounters with shared vulnerability blurred class lines, merging knights with townsfolk, at least temporarily, grounding them in raw humanity and shared reflexes. Shared vulnerability and resilience. In the grand collapse of battle, class distinctions dissolved into the mud, where the motive of every fleeing soul was identical: survival. Knights and peasants, forming unlikely bonds, navigated daunting threats that transcended status. This brief reality revealed a truth otherwise hidden. Shared instincts surpass age-old divisions. Amidst the tide of shared vulnerability, the resilience and determination of the fleeing host emerged as a testament to human strength, forcing each person to reconsider how thin the veil between command and commonality truly was. As knights made their daring retreats, each discarded piece symbolized a path towards sustenance and shelter, the kind found not just in distant lands but within fragile identities. The journey away from the battlefield honored neither chivalry nor epic legend, but offered stark truths about adaptability in harrowing circumstances. Here, honor intertwined with an inglorious march focused on self-preservation, pivoting towards a future perhaps brighter than tales of battlefield glory could predict. Though hastily assembled and fragmented, it pointed enduringly to new horizons, replacing the legacy of swordplay with resilience, the pursuit in its cruelty. In the chaos of a medieval battlefield, mercy was often scarce for those desperate to escape. The romantic notion of chivalry might portray knights as honorable figures, but during a retreat, such ideals quickly faded. Once the signal to withdraw was given, discipline dissolved, leaving behind a maelstrom of panic and fear. Archers, seizing the opportunity to strike, rained arrows on exposed backs. Escape became an intoxicating mix of adrenaline and terror, a physical and psychological flight fueled by the haunting presence of death closing in, unleashed by leaders hungry for victory. Amidst this turmoil, the importance of winning overshadowed the individual lives of enemy soldiers. Pursuit wasn't just a tactical maneuver, It was an opportunity to completely dismantle the enemy. This cold, relentless chase wasn't mere bloodlust, but a calculated strategy ingrained through centuries of warfare. The cavalry's deadly role. Winning battles often meant reducing the enemy's future threat, obliteration rather than victory. Knights on horseback played a central role in this grim theater. Cavalry transformed a retreat into a deadly chase. Their powerful steeds turned the scattering soldiers' last sounds into metal-clad doom. It was a living nightmare, with the mighty roar of hooves echoing in the ears of those on foot. While soldiers might find refuge in hidden paths and shadows, open fields became killing grounds for the mounted pursuers. The cavalry's might and speed cornered stragglers, cutting through the faltering defenses of the retreating. A ruthless dance of dominance and numbers, reaffirming victory with each severed flag, each plundered prize. However, the cavalry were not invulnerable. Tales are numerous of knights unhorsed amidst charges, struck down in combats they initiated. Yet these risks were overshadowed by the tactical and psychological advantages gained. Swift-moving knights spread fear, reclaiming banners and trinkets from fallen foes as symbols of triumph. Archers, harbingers of doom. Even as they gnawed at the edges of the retreating forces, it was sanctioned warfare, efficient cruelty enshrined in the medieval rulebook, sealing the victory with unflinching finality. Behind them, masterful archers played their part with lethal precision. From strategic vantage points, they unleashed a storm of arrows, disrupting coordination and delivering what might have been merciful deaths to those running for their lives. Without armor, exposed and vulnerable, the retreating soldiers were easy prey. Each arrow a potential final act of war. They targeted officers, seeking to further fragment any lingering chain of command. Part executioner, part harbinger of doom, the dread they instilled was the stuff of legends and nightmares, whispered around campfires like an unending dirge of defeat. The fate of the fallen and the rise of looting. Amidst this chaos, fallen soldiers faced a grim fate. Slipping in blood-soaked mud or stumbling in flight could mark a fatal end. Once down, a knight's or foot soldier's survival odds plummeted. The relentless pursuit left no time for mercy. Those left behind found themselves at the mercy of looters or left to perish. Surviving such a fall required cunning and luck, as foes would often strip the injured of valuables, turning battlefields into bizarre marketplaces of death where spoils outweighed sentiment. Looting became an inevitable dance in the aftermath, a grim necessity fueling soldiers' livelihoods. Abandoned weapons, discarded shields. Each item was a prize in the medieval economy of conquest. Armor from the dead became the victor's reward, a tangible testament to their triumph. This act, while practical, inflicted further indignity upon the deceased. Viewed through contemporary eyes, this ritual highlights a war machine indifferent to human dignity, where every defeat provided assets repurposed for survival. The human cost of retreat. Such pursuits contributed to significant losses documented by coroners and chroniclers. These records tell a story of retreat causing more casualties than initial clashes, painting vivid images of loss. Warriors became nameless statistics in the annals of history, reminding us that battles were not always heroic, but grueling tests of survival. The scars of retreat ran deep long after the battlefields were empty. Returning soldiers, branded with the taint of failure, carried the burden of shame into villages that once celebrated their valor. Medieval society, bound by honor, punished the defeated with enduring stigma, rewriting narratives of heroism into stories of disgrace. Yet for those who survived, it was an adaptation, a redefinition that defied societal expectations, forcing them to forge new paths long after swords were sheathed, nature as adversary and ally. In this unforgiving dance with fate, nature itself became an adversary to the fleeing. Once familiar landscapes turned hostile, trapping soldiers in swamps, rivers, and forests that offered little sympathy. In their frantic escape, men faced nature's indifference, a silent testament to its omnipresence in medieval life. The interplay between survival and natural elements further darkened the tapestry of warfare. The memories of these harrowing flights turned soil into sacred text, tales spoken and reshaped through the years, providing lessons in survival and strategy. Retreats were not just about facing defeat, they were lessons in the art of survival, preparing the experienced for future conflicts. Through retreat, armies learned the value of strategic withdrawal, paving the way for resilience. In the end, fleeing was not just a desperate act, but a tactical decision, weaving the complex narrative of the human spirit against the brutal odds of warfare. Nature's deceptive maze. In the chaotic aftermath of a medieval battlefield, the natural world served as both a refuge and an intricate, treacherous maze. Soldiers fleeing the clamor of steel and the cries of war sought concealment in rivers, forests, and swamps. These elements of nature extended like welcoming arms, offering a hiding place for those desperate to evade the pursuing enemy. The dense woods became sanctuaries, their thick canopy of leaves and tangled underbrush creating almost impenetrable cover, even for knights weighed down by armor. Yet this sanctuary came with its own set of challenges, demanding both cunning and sharp awareness. A well-worn forest path could quickly become a trap if one failed to listen for the subtle crunch of an adversary's footfall or spot the freshly turned earth indicating another's passage. The hazards of the landscape. While these natural barriers promised cover, they also presented significant dangers. Rivers, though serving as boundaries between life and capture, were treacherous with unpredictable currents that threatened to sweep away the weary and wounded. The forests, seemingly alive with the chatter of birds and rustle of leaves, were home to unseen predators that could turn from allies to adversaries as day gave way to night. Swamps, with their alluring tapestry of reeds and wildlife, were notorious for swallowing men whole, trapping the unwary in a quagmire of mud and confusion. To survive, one had to become a keen observer of nature, interpreting rustling leaves or distant bird calls as either warnings or hidden messages. The landscape itself became an opponent, demanding respect from those who dared to traverse its uncertain paths. Rivers, barriers, and lifelines. Rivers in particular held a strange duality, serving as both barriers and lifelines. Their ceaseless flow offered fugitives a way to erase tracks and muffle the sounds of pursuit. Yet they posed significant obstacles to those lacking the skill to swim through the cold and current. In these dire retreats, the ability to navigate the water separated those who lived from those who perished. However, even skilled swimmers faced the icy grip of hypothermia and the drag of heavy armor pulling them towards a watery grave. Successfully crossing a river offered a chance, a sort of baptism, promising escape from human violence through nature's peril. Forests, anonymity, and danger. Forests, on the other hand, were ecosystems bustling with life and layers of mystery. For soldiers on the run, they represented a realm of anonymity, where one's noble status held no more weight than a fallen leaf. Nobles would shed their finery to blend in, relying on instinct over lineage to find refuge. The forest demanded skill and an understanding of its language, providing protection only to those who could read the signs of nature and move with the rhythm of the land. But venturing into these wooded depths came with its own set of dangers. Each step threatened to betray one's presence, each murmur of wind or animal potentially announcing foes. Here, survival required more than strength. It was a dance of shadows, not without irony given the humbling nature of such a setting. Swamps, treachery beneath the calm. Swamps added yet another layer of complexity, a landscape soaked in mire and dim light. Swamps appeared benign, but concealed treacheries beneath their calm surfaces. Soldiers had to tread carefully lest they be consumed by the grasping mud. Here, survival was a balance of courage and respect for nature's hidden rules, with the continuation of life resting on the ability to discern the shifting trails that only the experienced could identify. Swamps offered a strange kind of refuge, demanding a respect that the unwise often ignored at their peril. Weather's double-edged sword. Even the weather could become an unexpected ally or foe. Fog and rain provided a cloak, concealing movements and masking scents, affording a retreating army the cover it desperately needed. But nature's moods were fickle, turning oppressive with sudden storms that swelled rivers or rain that transformed paths into treacherous slides. Those who relied too heavily on the whims of weather quickly learned of its untamed nature, an ally only to those who understood its unpredictable patterns. Animal guides and betrayers. In the theater of retreat, Animals played their part as unwilling participants. Their instinctive actions served as guides or harbingers, pointing the way with swift movements or betraying hiding spots with a startled dash. Soldiers who understood this dance of nature, who could read the signs and sounds, found unexpected guides amidst their flight. Though these alliances were fragile and unpredictable, psychological landscapes of fear. Beyond physical landscapes, retreat meant traversing psychological terrains filled with fear and the unknown. Anxiety fed on the uncertainty of escape, with imagined horrors of forest specters or hidden enemies haunting every shadow. Crossing these mental landscapes demanded the strength to face the fears lingering just out of sight, over hills and through trees, revealing retreats as tests of inner resolve as much as physical courage. The physical toll and nature's crucible. Pushed to their limit, soldiers grappling with fatigue felt their ordeal mirrored in the relentless challenges of nature. Exhaustion gripped those who stumbled through mud and freezing currents, emphasizing the harsh physical cost of attempting to flee. Comrades fell by the wayside, their journey ended by the unyielding terrain or by wounds too severe. Yet for those who persevered, nature became not a scene of despair, but a crucible shaping individuals into resilient survivors. Each escape bore witness to the ironic truth that in nature's vastness, survival was a journey as much about finding oneself as it was about evading the specter of fate trailing close behind. Capture, a twisted game. In the swirling chaos of medieval battlefield retreats, the scene often resembled a twisted game of cat and mouse, where the stakes were life and freedom, and everyone was a participant. For nobles, capture was a gripping saga of uncertainty, where salvation and doom danced upon the whims of their captors. To be captured as a noble was to be both cursed and blessed. It could open doors to prolonged negotiations over bated breaths, with promises of hefty ransoms hanging like ripe fruit. The captured noble might find themselves treated as a guest of sorts, albeit a reluctant one, treated with an odd civility, confined by the enemy's grace until money could be exchanged and freedom restored. Ransom and its cost. Yet not all captures were so civilized. Some nobles traded their status for the squalor of dungeon cells, where the musty smell of despair clung to the air, and darkness became a constant companion. The economics of ransom was a cold calculation, often dragging on for months or years. As noble families became debtors, their wealth drained by a system that valued gold as much as valor. This grim practicality did not extend to common soldiers. For them, the battlefield was simply a waiting massacre. Their capture held no monetary value, only the swift certainty of execution looming over them, their lives dismissed as expendable in the grim ledger of war. The few commoners who escaped immediate death found themselves chained into forced labor, not unlike modern-day slavery. Forced labor and betrayal, immersed in the relentless grind of menial army tasks, trapped between dreams of rescue and resignation to fate, these soldiers became faceless cogs in the war machine, where mercy was a luxury they could barely conceive of. For some, survival meant betrayal. The urge to live prompted men to abandon loyalties for whispered deals, ensuring their own survival at the expense of others. Betrayal shattered trust, turning comrades into pawns on a chessboard of desperation, reshaping destinies as quickly as winds shift over open seas. The weapon of anonymity. Nobles feared both capture and betrayal. Yet they also possessed the secret weapon of anonymity. Shedding identifying armor, they might slip through the chaos unnoticed, having exchanged the finery of their station for the anonymity of dirt-covered rags. It was a sobering disguise that stripped away differences in birthright, demanding that elegance be sacrificed for the art of survival. This anonymity was their refuge, erasing distinctions that normally structured life, but now offered disguise as their first line of defense. The paradox of noble captivity. Ransom was less about justice and more about transaction. Families and benefactors eagerly pooled funds, buzzing with the tension of negotiations that could drag them into the quicksand of financial ruin. Here, the noble captive was a paradox, honored yet confined, a bargaining chip under the weight of social norms. This strange etiquette of captivity demanded they show courtesy even when hope was scarce. Yet the burden lay heavily on their families to secure their liberation, pooling and scrimping resources to settle this noble claim to freedom. The shadowy economy of capture. The economics of capture spawned a shadowy world of underhanded trading where unscrupulous captors operated beneath the radar, converting lives into secretive currency far beyond battles. This web of transactions extended beyond the front lines, igniting new allegiances born from the allure of gold rather than the draw of glory. The nobility and commoners intertwined within these dark networks became currency in a market where worth shifted with every whispered vow. The weight of a name. Names carried weight both as armor and target. A renowned name provided sanctuary, yet invited peril. Its echoes in halls of power manifested as both shield and bullseye. The battlefield's desires targeted the fame resonating within those names, seeking either to ransom or erase, shaping history's landscape through such leverage. With such a dual identity, the weight of a name carved a path of both honor and danger, where respect and threat seemed inevitably bound together by crisis. Despair in the dungeon. Those who fell into the silent embrace of dungeons found themselves consumed by despair's crushing grip. Their captivity was not just physical, but a psychological siege where every passing moment felt like an eternity against the stony backdrop of medieval imprisonment. The cold confines of cells turned time into a cruel companion, worn down by the lack of hope and companionship, which gnawed at their humanity with relentless persistence. Calculations of survival dictated the paths men took on and off the battlefield, each choice a gamble with one's fate tied to instinct and circumstance. These dilemmas echoed louder than the clash of swords as decisions of life and death churned in the dense fog of war's chaos, revealing the lengths a person would go to grasp life, even when honor seemed a fragile, flickering memory. The lingering scars of betrayal. After battle's storm, the human cost of desperate choices lingered. The legacies of betrayal and survival simmered in the connections, torn apart by war's cruel hand. Communities bore the quiet scars of deceit as trust shattered and old alliances frayed under silent judgments. Bitter memories haunted personal relations, binding those left to reckon with the era's cruel arithmetic of life's worth, or its lack thereof, engraved indelibly by the whispers of betrayal. The shame of retreat for knights. In the tumultuous realm of medieval chivalry, a knight's armor was more than protection. It was a testament to his honor. When a battle turned sour, shedding those metal layers meant shedding dignity, leaving scars far deeper than the skin. The act of fleeing while ensuring survival often planted the seeds of shame. In these times when the echoes of clashing swords subsided, surviving knights faced a society that valued valor above life itself. Returning to familiar grounds, these individuals bore the accusations of cowardice, each glance an unspoken judgment from those who had once stood beside them under the banner of brotherhood. The irony of the knight's plight. The irony of the knight's predicament was not lost in an era steeped in contradictions. They were meant to be paragons of piety and courage, but faced an internal conflict when their only choice was survival. Many knights, weary of quiet scorn, chose anonymity, living away from noble courts. Others sought redemption through pilgrimages, steps heavy with penance, aimed at restoring some semblance of their tarnished honor. The relentless whispers of society fostered a landscape of guilt and redemption, navigating these murky waters with no easy guide. The stigma for common soldiers. For common soldiers, the stakes seemed different, but were no less daunting. Without the trappings of chivalric honor, they returned home with the simple expectation of living to see another day. Yet even they, souls tied to earth and toil, could not escape the stigma of perceived cowardice. These men returned to landscapes that might scorn them as deserters, their survival overshadowed by the ghost of comrades left behind. For many, battle was an escape from poverty, and surviving one felt like a dark lottery win. Their sting of shame was a lurking shadow, mingled with abandonment and a label as expendable in the harshest of games. Communal and familial impact. The burdens of shame didn't rest solely on a knight's shoulders or a soldier's brow. They rippled out into familial and communal lives, altering the course of marriages and status, severing ties once strengthened by shared victories or trades. Honor and reputation were public virtues meticulously maintained. A single act of fleeing could unravel complex webs, leaving the survivors in isolation. their tales morphing into legendary whispers among the townsfolk. Folklore and a different kind of bravery. Despite the shadows of disgrace, stories of clever escapes introduced a subtle valor into folklore. These tales, spun into chansons and campfire stories, depicted those who slipped through death's grasp as quick-witted and prudent. Such tales, rich in moral undertones, suggested a different kind of bravery rooted in the wisdom of knowing when to retreat, an instinct celebrated rather than ridiculed. Sitting by firesides, those who spun these narratives preserved a duality within the tapestry of human experience. A cautious courage praised quietly in the heart of folklore. Art and the ambiguities of survival. Craftsmen of melody and rhyme, medieval poets and musicians wove social commentary directly into their works. Retreats often found unexpected champions in allegories and metaphors, offering critique on rigid honor codes. For audiences, these were windows into survival's ambiguities, challenging outdated notions with tunes both satirical and romantic. These lyrical narratives portrayed life's tactical withdrawals as necessary journeys, romances of humility over pride, and celebrated a future that marveled at survival's noble simplicity. Religion and redemption. The medieval soul's journey from shame to redemption frequently intersected with religion. The Church, an ever-present guardian of morality, offered penance as a path to harmony. Prayers, almsgiving, or embarking on far-reaching crusades offered not just earthly relief, but spiritual absolution. Even those who sought solace in monastic life found a gatekeeper willing to guide them back into dignity's embrace. The Church wielded considerable influence, a counterpoint to secular judgment, intervening in these redemptive arcs with a holy narrative thread. Timeless lessons in resilience. Moreover, the struggle between valor and retreat resonates into our modern era, reflecting the psychological burdens today's veterans carry. The medieval survivors' stigmatization parallels contemporary battles with trauma and reintegration, though separated by centuries. By examining these experiences through a present-day lens, we uncover timeless insights into human resilience and the unyielding instinct to survive. We uncover truths about how survival sometimes conflicts with honor's rigid codes, wisdom echoed throughout history's fabric. Ultimately, these medieval tales offer lessons on the legacy of retreat. They remind us that turning away from battle is not a failure, but a complex decision balancing strength with vulnerability. Such stories invite us to rethink valor, seeking deeper empathy for those navigating battles within and without. These echoes from the past encourage dialogue on the moral dilemmas of survival, remaining relevant as we confront our own trials. As we unravel the narratives of those who chose life amidst chaos, we renew our understanding of humanity's endless dance with survival, a testament to embracing the courage to live and fight anew. Historical retreats, pivotal moments. In the chaotic theater of medieval warfare, battles could pivot on a single moment where confidence swiftly dissolved into calamity, and retreat loomed large over the battlefield. These retreats were more than simple military maneuvers. They were dramatic episodes that often determined the fate of entire dynasties and shaped the course of history. Imagine standing amidst the clash of swords and the screams of men, only to watch power shift in an instant as courage crumbled into the raw instinct for survival. Consider, for instance, the English retreat from Patay in 1429. Caught off guard by the relentless French cavalry, the once formidable English forces were thrown into disarray, their renowned discipline giving way to panic. Soldiers scattered, each man racing faster than fear itself, hoping to evade capture or death. This retreat was not just a military withdrawal, it was a shattering of spirit and reputation, a blow that ushered in a resurgent era for France under the fiery leadership of Joan of Arc, a young woman who ignited a nation and dispelled the myth of English invincibility. That rapid retreat haunted England, serving as a grim reminder of vulnerability and marking a significant shift in the 100 Years' War, turning the tide in favor of the French and altering the long-term balance. Bannockburn and Scottish independence. And then there was Bannockburn in 1314. The English army, routed by Robert the Bruce's forces, scattered in a panic-stricken retreat, infamous for its chaotic despair. The tight ranks of the English soldiers disintegrated like a tapestry unraveling under the Scottish advance, caught in a hopeless crush against the land's rugged contours. Here, history witnessed the underdog's victory turn into legend, a desperate scramble for survival that underscored the tactical missteps of the powerful English. This retreat reverberated throughout the British Isles, sowing the seeds for Scottish independence in triumph over a foe bloated with overconfidence. Its echoes remain less a mere retreat and more a declaration of national pride and the reclaiming of sovereignty. Falkirk, chaos and victory. The less famed yet equally telling chaos at Falkirk in 1298 adds another dimension to our story. Even in victory, order was a whisper lost to the wind. For both English and Scots, it was a chaotic retreat from organization and morale. Caught in the quagmire of battle, both sides faced the same enemy, disorder, each leader struggling to regain control from the tumult. This retreat, situated awkwardly between triumph and disorder, revealed that even victories could breed confusion and frailty, teaching harsh lessons about the necessity of maintaining command amidst the tangled webs of warfare. Strategic insights from defeat. Despite the seeming gloom of retreat, critical strategic insights emerged from these ashes. Mistakes were transformed into catalysts for change, driving new doctrines in military command and tactics. Retreats taught commanders the value of adaptability and flexibility in the face of chaos, reshaping warfare's conduct and highlighting the enduring significance of morale and leadership. They compelled warriors to reimagine strategy, not as a fixed plan, but as a dynamic entity, learning from defeat to avert future disaster, much like a phoenix rising renewed from fields scorched by its own fiery demise. The stigma of the medieval warrior. But no retreat left its mark purely on strategy. The weight of defeat was profoundly felt by those who experienced it. For the medieval warrior, retreat bore an indelible stigma, branding survivors with shame or cowardice. It punctuated tales with haunting reminders of human vulnerability for soldiers steeped in cultures of honor. Retreating cast long shadows, weaving dark threads into personal and collective memory. It was a mark that affected recruitment, community standing, and individual pride. A scar that touched families and kingdoms alike, influencing future generations well into the future. Economic and political aftershocks. Economic and political aftershocks further rippled from these moments of defeat. Retreats were akin to the earth shifting beneath the medieval world, altering territories and trade, unsettling economies as easily as they realigned political power. Kings watched fragile feudal loyalties waver as the winds of retreat exposed weakness, inciting revolts and treaties. Such shifts were powerful reminders of how, while battles were won and lost, it was often the retreat that moved the chess pieces on the grand board of medieval Europe, illustrating the strange alchemy of war, where failure often created new avenues for change or upheaval. The commander's burden in retreat. This dance between triumph and retreat also underscored the commander's burden. Leadership in retreat was a crucible of character, defining legacies not merely by victories, but by how they handled retreats. It was a role that demanded resilience, stewardship, and sometimes the harrowing choice of sacrifice or survival. Commanders who navigated these murky waters became not just leaders, but legends, their tales offering enduring lessons in valor and adaptability, crafting narratives as vivid and important as any victory. Thus, the legacies of retreat became folklore, stories retold in smoky taverns and reverberating through generations as symbols of resilience. They celebrated the stubborn spirit of survival over destruction, human courage amidst despair. In these narratives, history reveals itself not merely through swords and sieges, but in the nuanced territories between victory and retreat, a testament to humanity's compelling dance with destiny's darker shadows. The precarious role of the commander. In the swirling chaos of a medieval retreat, the role of a commander was both critical and perilous. As the front line crumbled and panic spread like wildfire, commanding figures faced a daunting task, not of regaining control, but of preventing complete annihilation. Amidst the clamor of defeat, some leaders found themselves paralyzed, their authority dissolving in the thick smoke of abandonment. These men, once towering symbols of stability, now grappled with the instinct to flee versus the duty to preserve their men and orchestrate a calculated retreat rather than a disorganized rout. The fog of war, dense and unforgiving, blurred the lines of decision-making. They debated whether to engage once more in reckless courage or to withdraw, conserving strength for a more opportune time. True leadership in dire moments. The true measure of a leader often emerged in these dire moments. Some commanders understood that genuine leadership sometimes required a cold, calculating mind, recognizing that a lost battle didn't automatically mean a lost war. Retreating strategically, perhaps after premeditated planning, offered the potential to regroup at a fortified position. Yet medieval chronicles rarely celebrated these pragmatic decisions. Instead, tales of heroic last stands dominated, crafting a narrative that often overshadowed the true essence of leadership. True wisdom lay in discerning when to confront and when to concede, with the foresight to blend bravery with prudence, securing another chance to fight. The art of disappearance, however, retreat required more than physical withdrawal. It was a mental game, a mastery of the art of disappearance. Success depended on slipping away unnoticed, embracing the chaos as a cloak. Some commanders executed this retreat not through bold rallying cries, but through whispered coordination and subtle movements. Secrecy was paramount. They moved like shadows, blending into civilian crowds, donning commoners' clothes and sometimes even feigning death. These maneuvers were not signs of cowardice, but of intelligence born out of careful preparation, acknowledging defeat as a contingency. Disguises, decoys, they were crafted in advance, laying groundwork for significant portions to evade enemy capture, prioritizing survival over valor. The ultimate path of honor. Yet amidst those who quietly slipped away, others chose the ultimate path of honor, death in the face of defeat. Bound by chivalric codes, many commanders believed in the nobility of perishing alongside their men, equating their worth to valor as much as to victory. This embracing of their end was less a strategic decision and more symbolic, reinforcing loyalty and stirring vigor among their followers. Their stories were etched in legend, turned into moral fables by chroniclers seeking to elevate noble sacrifice as the ideal of medieval warfare. It was a narrative compelling enough to inspire survivors, fueling a narrative worth fighting and sometimes dying for. Commanders who vanished. Contrasting sharply with such legendary tales were those of commanders who vanished, focusing solely on their own survival. Their stories were whispers around campfires, leaving behind troops to face carnage unaccompanied. These leaders exchanged dignity for escape, staining their legacies with a mark that was difficult to erase. The absence of leadership often unraveled the fragile threads of command, turning controlled retreat into shameful routes. Despite any rationalizations of necessitated escape, their names rarely escaped infamy, being synonymous with betrayal. Covering the retreat, other commanders chose not to exit quietly, but to cover their soldiers' retreat at great personal risk. They fell while leading, embodying the belief that a commander's duty included the preservation of his men, even if it meant sacrificing himself. These actions inspired fierce loyalty, allowing soldiers brief moments to regroup and evade imminent death. Their deaths were lauded as acts of valor, offering strength through the retelling of their heroism. These tales resonated deeply, immortalizing these figures as paragons of brave leadership, forging a legacy of camaraderie and shared sacrifice. Shepherds of retreat. Then there were the shepherds of retreat, rare figures who expertly guided their forces to safety. Calm amidst calamity, they managed to maintain clarity, steering their troops with foresight and grounded wisdom. Their retreats were not signs of surrender, but instead strategic withdrawals, serving as a testament to the nuanced art of command. Their decisions preserved more than just soldiers' lives. They maintained futures, merging military necessity with moral obligation. Under their steady leadership, retreating soldiers found purpose. Survival wasn't failure, but an opportunity to live, fight, and rebuild anew. Balancing order and chaos. Skillful commanders balanced retreat, coordinating order against the overwhelming tide of chaos. Mastering the disorder demanded talents akin to conducting symphonies, transforming scattered disorder into tactical withdrawals. By employing natural defenses and obstructionary tactics, they staved off chaos, turning potential slaughter into structured retreats. In understanding the battlefield's pulse, They wielded retreat as another weapon, protecting military resources for future battles. Political implications of retreat. Retreats harbored not just military, but political implications. Commanders weighing their decisions were keenly aware that their actions carried repercussions stretching beyond the battlefield. Strategic withdrawals could preserve not just honor, but also titles and lands otherwise jeopardized by reckless engagements. These breaks in battle lines intertwined with political stability, where wisely guided retreats could enhance reputations while failures magnified weaknesses exploitable by political rivals. Lasting legacies of retreat. The echoes of retreat lingered far beyond the battlefield, transforming into lasting legacies woven into stories shared across generations. Commanders, whether lauded for cunning strategy or lampooned for cowardice, became staples in the repository of military wisdom. Retreats, as much as conquests, provided lessons in human nature and strategy, reminding future leaders of the value in defeat. From these experiences emerged leaders tempered by loss. Their stories a reminder that survival, not mere victory, defined enduring success. Courage in choosing life. In the hushed silence of fireside stories, one might hear a quiet truth seldom shared. Medieval warriors, faced with a brutal calculation of survival, might have summoned courage not by charging into inevitable death, but by choosing a timely retreat. The notion that retreat equaled cowardice stems from modern misconceptions that oversimplify the chaotic realities of medieval battle. To pause the tale and consider this, when the tide turned and the battlefield screamed of defeat, seasoned fighters often chose life over noble but senseless sacrifice, demonstrating a courageous defiance against tradition's hold on valor, despite the taint of shame it carried back home. Picture the field, the art of strategic survival. Trumpets silenced, the chaos unabated. Warriors calculated their next move amidst a deafening murmur. To retreat was a gamble, a dance in the face of chaos. Iron resolve and a keen intuition for navigating the terrain transformed these decisions from acts of cowardice into an art form as they weighed the grim reality of future loss against immediate sacrifice. Beyond weapons and foes, this choice confronted physical peril, of arrows finding backs, and the social stigma of a community proud of unwavering bravery. Yet for those who turned, retreat was about preserving breath for future battles, redefining courage in strategic survival against the savage anthems of neglected glory. A different form of bravery. This act of turning one's back, of moving against the scream of clashing metal, was its own form of bravery, misunderstood yet profoundly wise. On those mud-drenched fields, courage spoke not only in defiance, but through the wisdom of knowing when a fight was unwinnable. Tales abandoned the bold yet faithful. Instead, they whispered of survival to reassemble, ally, and re-engage. Retreat meant embracing life, prioritizing strategy over slaughter, and trusting in shared wisdom to defy the finality cloaked within battlefield cries. Leadership in preservation. Heroism in medieval retreat resided within the minds of those visionary enough to preserve their men over seeking impossible honor. Lords and knights daring to break from this narrative changed lives in its shadow, prioritizing future battles over hallmark martyrdom. Their wisdom traded personal valor for collective survival, demonstrating courage by turning retreat into an act of salvation, not cowardice. These were leaders stoic enough to guide from defeat back towards opportunity against the downward pull of certain demise. Driven not by fear but foresight, the ghosts of retreat. Yet great retreat did not come without dark consequences. Survivors faced inevitable judgments, navigating homeward beneath reproachful whispers of valor's traditional narrative, scraping against their ears like iron on stone. For knightly culture, running did not just stain armor, it marked souls. These warriors carried haunting memories of fallen comrades and judgment from peers who stood firm against death. Haunted not by physical foes, but silent ghosts of disgrace. They returned to lands that seemed familiar, yet were forever changed by absence and death's echo. As footprints found their way back onto familiar paths, these men battled disdain with their shield of survival. Burdened by memories yet full of life, they formed a silent pact to rise amidst disgrace's heavy mantle. It was a resilience, a yearning for redemption amidst prevailing scorn that redefined and reclaimed their essence. Through their perseverance, Stories once tarnished by rebellion against death's inevitability gradually spoke more about resilience and less about perceived shame. Solace in nature. Sorrow was tempered by the land itself. Nature provided solace amidst whispers of survival's necessity. Scarred by history and nature's own battles, retreats allowed warriors to hide among nature's watchful whispers. Meadows marked by centuries of conflict embraced them, offering quiet understanding in the face of disdain. Moments meditative in their simplicity granted peace amidst looming judgments. The land, untouched by human prejudice, wove silence around them, revealing survival's gentle secret pressed beneath history's fervent retelling. A tapestry of wisdom. Ultimately, the retreat told tales rich in strategic wisdom, a lifelong lesson held in the depths of memory. To live, to retreat, and to learn stood as a testament to war's enduring artistry, not just in weaponry, but in the development of tactics that prioritize life over brutal attrition. Among these soldiers, every step away from roaring foes taught richer strategy, deepened resolve, and contributed to shared wisdom. These retreats, recorded by scribes navigating the tales that time would tell, wove fragile threads into a tapestry of ancestral wisdom from which we benefit today. This path of retreat is etched in the words of folklore beyond the church bells, a dance where survival played its own rhythm against the solemn drum of fatalism. Here retreats left legacies of endurance, echoing beyond stone and parchment into whispers. Even today, they tread their echoes into legend, surpassing martyrdom through humanity's invincible dance through the embrace of retreat. Emerged tales of tenacity woven intricately within folklore's enduring embrace, marrying time's endless cycle with heroic tales spoken from smoky hearths. An enduring narrative. So here, in these quietly spun stories of misunderstood valor, the retreat marked relics kept within abandoned artifacts, a survival hidden beneath layers of time. They survived not just by chance or luck, but by decision, rewriting tales that included courage found in living to fight anew. Subscribe, a reminder that history often leaves untold pages between the cries of war and peace. In those moments where humanity's narrative found hope in retreat, not surrender, a tale that continues to turn within our own understanding of courage and the will to live.